Now, more than 180 teachers in the Western Cape have been attacked inside school premises over the last 3 years. Since the start of this academic year, 9 incidents with 1 death of a teacher were reported. What does this mean to the safety of teachers? To help unpack just this, a spokesperson for the Western Cape Education MEC, Kerry, Mauchline, who joins us via Zoom. Kerry, thank you very much for your time. I mean, these figures are honestly disturbing, but perhaps to enlighten us, are the perpetrators mostly from the public, or it would be students within the school premises?
So, yes, it is quite a high number. It's quite a big headline number, but there are a couple of things actually to note about it. First and foremost, that is an important question you've asked in terms of who the perpetrators are. Unfortunately, the majority of these incidents are actually perpetrated by learners. So it's less an idea of sort of criminals coming onto the school property from outside and attacking teachers. There's a lot of classroom kind of altercations, but also just to be very clear on those, in that big number, it should be noted that the majority of those are classified as what we call superficial incidents. So that's altercations, arguments, maybe where there's some pushing and shoving, or minor injuries, but what definitely doesn't require further medical treatment at all. So it's not like we're looking at 187 instances of someone coming onto school property and attacking a teacher with a weapon, for example.
But nonetheless, very disturbing that, in fact, it's learners that are the perpetrators. What does it say about the schooling system? Because if I'm an employee coming to work and I could be harmed by the learners, it's quite disturbing. Are they coming in with weapons?
In those minor altercations, certainly not. Once a weapon's involved, we really start considering that to be a more serious incident. But I think our biggest problem that we struggle with is that when learners are experiencing problem behavior from an early age, they bring that with them to school. And as we know, behavior of children, behavior of adults, just the same, is quite a complex set of circumstances that give rise to that. And that's what makes it so very difficult to address. So obviously the department, knowing that this is where the real core problem is, has been investing a lot of time and energy in dealing with that. And I think we're seeing the results of some of those interventions, whether they be psychosocial interventions or our Transform to Perform strategy, which also looks at this issue. We're starting to see those numbers come down. Obviously, the statistics are a bit thrown out by COVID-19 and how that's affected school attendance.
But are you honestly equipping teachers with the right tools to perhaps assist these children with the psychosocial issues that they might be beset by?
Absolutely. So one of the core parts of our psychosocial interventions, it looks at both sides. It looks at the learners and it also looks at the teachers. So things like training in classroom, conflict management, a very important part of what we do. But also in terms of identifying learners with any kind of problem behavior very early on, because once you sort of get to the end of the line, it's much harder to deal with. So what we're trying to do is equip teachers as well to spot that kind of behavior and make sure that they can refer them to the specialized people that we have in our district offices. We have social workers and psychologists who can then recommend the appropriate interventions. We also have really great relationships with other departments in our government. So, for example, the Department of Social Development to assist with that kind of societal problem that we're trying to deal with, but also law enforcement. They also do come in and do quite a bit of training and engagement with us to try and address these matters before they happen.
Now, there has been an attempt by some to sort of explain why we're seeing a lot of altercations between children or students and their teachers. And some have said at times it's because there would still be corporal punishment in some of these schools where children would be retaliating or something of that nature where the teacher was physical at first. It's not to explain the conduct of young people nor the conduct of teachers, but it has been a conversation or an element that has been thrown into the conversation that there is a bit of corporal punishment taking place at these schools, and then these children then imitate this type of behavior where they communicate with their hands?
Absolutely. And I think the very important thing to remind everyone up front is that corporal punishment is illegal in our schools in terms of the South African Schools Act, and it's actually an offence under that act. So for us, the very, very important thing to do is to report any of those incidents to the department. We have a Safe Schools toll-free hotline number. It's 0800 45 46 47. And any learner who's suffering any kind of abuse, including corporal punishment, can report it immediately there to make sure that we intervene. But I think we also have an incredible responsibility as adults to demonstrate the kind of behavior that we want to see our children practice. And that's not just what teachers need to be doing, it's what everyone needs to be doing. It's parents, it's everyone else, it's all our officials. And I think that's something that we do need to focus on more as a society in general. And I think that's where we also would see the impact on things like gender-based violence, for example. It's a societal problem and it's a complex problem. And trying to simplify it to something that'll have a silver bullet solution, if we do that, we're already losing the battle.
Mm-hmm. And then in the instance where we have public members of society entering the premises and harming teachers, I mean, that would be something where it would be said you, as government, have failed those teachers because you, as the employer, you were supposed to ensure that there is a security system that is functional. You don't just enter the premises, particularly with weapons, because we've reported on stories where teachers were shot, in fact, inside the premises. What do you have to say to that?
Mm-hmm. So certainly we do invest quite a lot in physical protection, protective measures around the school perimeter. But I think there's also a couple of things to remember there. In the incident that we saw recently, where we very tragically lost one of our teachers who was shot on the school premises, that school had a fence and it had a security guard. So when there are criminals who are dedicated to the idea of coming, particularly when it's a targeted attack, there's very little that you can do to stop that. But that said, we do a lot of work in these fields, especially in cooperation with law enforcement. But we are also limited in terms of the budget, which unfortunately gets cut every year, in our ability to build fences at every school. So we prioritize those schools that are at highest risk every year.
Mm-hmm. And then in terms of the security guards, though, do they carry guns, or it's not something that is desirable in a schooling environment?
Look, I think I would be certainly myself nervous of an idea of highly almost militarizing schools and the entrances to schools. But it also depends on the company. Some schools do have armed guards, some don't. It is a very risky situation when you start to introduce arms and weapons into the schooling environment. But again, you have armed guards who are overwhelmed because there's a group of people. So I think what we really need to be talking about is how we get to the root cause, dealing with the root cause of this problem.
No, hopefully there is a possibility to reprioritize the budget to somehow protect the schooling environment. But thank you very much for your time. That was spokesperson for the Western Cape Education MSc, Kerry Mauchline, talking to us.